Good morning, everybody. I don't know that I'm quite awake enough to do this, but I'm going to attempt to do it anyway. So forgive me if thoughts are a little bit muddled or I'm a little bit all over the place. I don't have to be sleepy to be like that. I'm kind of like that all the time. But this morning, I don't have much going on. I have to work later this evening, so I have the day to just relax, to read, to play League of Legends, which I need to stop doing so much of. But this morning I've been good, and between yesterday and this morning I've been rereading 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollack. I can't find my pen. I just want my pen in my hand, that's all. Okay, well, it might not happen. Huh. It ran away. I swear. I have so many pens just lying around, but they all get lost. Okay, so what I really want to talk about, and I should have cards ready, which I don't, but I can just look in 78 degrees here, is the 4-card pattern is what this chapter is entitled. And I knew I liked it to begin with when I first read it, but rereading it has made me fall in love with it again. I love Rachel Pollack's take on the major arcana, the way she lines it up, the way she talks about it and reveals it to us. So really, really love it, and that's why I want to talk about it. I just think it's a great concept, and if you haven't read the book or haven't thought along these lines, here we go. So I'm going to post a picture. That's why I'm going to even go a little bit more off-center here so that there's room for it. But what we're looking at is this, basically the journey from innocence to enlightenment. And that's the journey from the fool to the world. So I'm not much of a teacher, guys. I am just not much of a teacher. And I guess I'm not really trying to teach as much as to discuss. It's just hard to do when I'm not on live to discuss. So this is my take on it. This is my take on it, which I have gotten from Rachel Pollack's lovely book. So the Fool and the World, again, represent this journey from just a state of complete innocence to a state of total enlightenment. That's the goal. And what we're talking about here is duality. Duality, because we see the Fool in the World aligning, and then we see the Magician and the High Priestess aligning. And this may be different. It was different for me, and it's probably different for a lot of people, because when we think about dualities or common themes, typically I've seen that the High Priestess is more paired with the Hierophant. We don't see the High Priestess really being paired with the Magician. We see the High Priestess and the Hierophant kind of as two sides of the same coin. That's how I typically have always viewed it, to be honest. But here that we see that she's paired directly with the Magician, and I think it makes loads of sense. So the Fool and the World, if we look at the similarities, they're both in movement, and that's something that we don't see in the rest of the major arcana. And the rest of the major, in most decks, anyway, especially, we're focusing on the RWS right now, but I think even in most decks, you'll see that besides the Fool and the World, the characters that we see in the majors are all, they're fixed positions. Very fixed, almost as if they're posing for a camera. There's no movement. In fact, there's not a ton of joy expressed in them. In some cases we see it, perhaps in the Empress, but even she is more kind of stoic. Of course, there's abundance, and it always looks beautiful and all this, but she's basically sitting there, very reserved, very static. Whereas in the World, as in the Fool in the World, we see the Fool in movement. We see the Fool often with some kind of animal, typically a dog beside him, which again represents that innocence to me. There's not much in this world that we view as purely innocent besides babies. But certainly like dogs, cats, animals, we generally look at them as innocent. That's probably why a lot of people, including myself, get super upset when we see animals mistreated. They can't help themselves because of their innocence. They just have a totally free, open view of the world, ready for anything, ready to engage. And that's what we see in the Fool, him moving towards just engagement and possibility. And while some people will put the Fool at the beginning or at the end, Rachel Pollack's take, and the stance I think I've created in my head too, is that the Fool is kind of an archetype that can fall anywhere in the major, minor. It can fall anywhere at any time. We can take on that archetype of the Fool, but certainly not in its purest form. Even total enlightenment, does that give us the Fool? The Fool to me is the very beginning. I hate to bring up religion, but it's a great in context, Adam and Eve, before the fall, were that total innocence, not knowing really anything about the world around them, listening blindly, although that's not pure innocence, but to them, in this story, that was the innocence that they took on, was blind devotion, blind faith. So just innocence in all its forms, beginnings, infinite potentiality, all those things we find in the Fool. And in the Fool's journey, we get to the world, and this is the other card, the world, that we see a little bit more movement. We usually see it's usually a female, sometimes a hermaphrodite, but we see them almost celebrating, looking joyful. There's usually a smile on their face. They're suspended in the air. They're, glorified almost. And that is the end goal of the major arcana, right? That is total enlightenment. That is just a totally different kind of freedom. It's no longer innocence because we've learned a lot along the way. We've incorporated many different archetypes, but it's in incorporating all of those that we come to that state of just enlightenment and just being free. We know all these things now that the Fool didn't know, so we're not innocent anymore. But we have learned to balance all of those things into a more pure state of being. I'm sure I'll come back to those, but let's move on to the Magician and the High Priestess, and that's what comes directly after or at the beginning of the major arcana if we're talking about the Fool being placed anywhere in this major. The Magician is number 1. The High Priestess number 2. And these signify the Fool and his loss of innocence. The split. Okay? The split of, there's a duality here now. The Fool is not complete. The Fool has now been split up into these two different, very, very separate entities, and that is where we lose our innocence. That is where we lose ourselves. While these are both great archetypes, they represent complete opposites. 1 and 2, odd and even. Magician male, High Priestess female. And then I've taken notes, which is just like, whoa, taking notes. Okay, so the Magician represents direct action. And I think we all know that. He's got his 4 elements. He's ready to use them. We see the hand going up, taking what he can from up above, taking all that inspiration, creativity, and then using it here on Earth, using all of his elements, everything he has at his disposal, to make something of himself. So this is more materialistic than we see in the High Priestess. It's more practical. It's more ego-driven. We have male, we have ego, and while the Magician is an amazing card, it is still it's not using the unconscious and the insight maybe that we have from the High Priestess. So then we go on to 2, which is the High Priestess, and that is going to represent total passivity. There is no action. She is very rigid, stoic again, connecting to the deep well of the unconscious, which is an amazing feeling, an amazing thing, and learning from that. But in doing so, and this is what Rachel Pollack, I think, is getting at, she is very, very passive. The High Priestess is not an action card. The High Priestess doesn't really do anything in the outside world. And this is where the Fool can get confused. The Fool has been split, and we don't know how we can try to balance these two, but we seem to mix them up, as Rachel Pollack says, going from one extreme to another, going from the magician and using our resources and acting on ego and creating. We go from that to pulling back and taking everything in, and that passiveness, instead of mixing the two, using the two together. So the whole goal then of the major arcana, of the tarot, is to reunite the Fool's separate entities. The Fool has been split into 1 and 2. So the world, being 21, which is 2 and 1, combines those two together. So if we're just looking at the major, of course the minor has a huge role in all this. But the major is really our guide to getting to that state of enlightenment where most of us want to be. And that goal is to bring together that which has been separated. So we too here look at the male and the female. And I think certainly in today's society that the balance is not there at all. People are looked at as either male or female, right? We don't normally look at somebody and say that they combine all of those aspects in a perfect manner. I'm a little bit more feminine, I have a lot of femininity in me, and there are a lot of females that will have a lot of masculinity in them. But we very, very seldom see somebody who combines those two traits perfectly. Somebody we can look at and say, they are everything. They are both male and female. And that is why we see in some decks the hermaphrodite on the world, because it's showing the unification of both sexes. And I haven't done a lot of considering about on this. There needs to be some sort of, there's a separateness in just gender and sex, penis, vagina, and the sexual interaction between the two, and how that populates the world. So there is definitely that separateness. Is that a good thing? Do we need that? Your comments, please. Would it be a perfect world if everybody were to inhabit and exhibit both traits at the same time in a perfect manner? I don't know. It sounds lovely. Would it work? We're never going to get there, so we can think about it all day, but it's not going to happen. So, yeah, I'm looking at my notes, and again, the world, the full potential. The world now represents full potential because we have the balance. We know how to be both active and out there in the world, while at the same time diving in and connecting ourselves to the unconscious of the universe and using all that to help create. It represents doing those things in perfect unison, and that is what will complete us. We also see the world, the Fool is as clothed, again, like Adam and Eve. Not really, there is a sexual openness to the Fool, in the sense that in the sense of just his innocence, not really knowing yet what being open sexually really means. But in the world, we see it very clearly. The world is, I think, almost 100% of the time, but nearly all of the time, naked. Naked. And that shows us that this world, this major, has incorporated everything to such a degree that they are completely sexually expressive, completely comfortable in who they are. And I love when I see people like that. I have gotten closer in just the last year to doing that. I put on makeup in videos, which is something, I'm using makeup, which is something that I did years ago, but haven't done much since, and I am comfortable with it. I go to work with makeup on, and I don't mind that people see it, although I'm pretty good at it, so people don't normally notice. But I don't care anymore. The fact that I'm willing to put it up in a video shows me that I have come a long way in being more sexually expressive and open about who I am, about my masculinity versus my femininity, and not caring about people's reactions when I use either of those. What else do I have in here? Magician, High Priestess. Just some great quotes that I will share from Rachel Pollack when we're talking about the magician. She says, "What greater creativity is there than giving shape to the chaos of experience?" And that is the magician. So in no way are we downplaying these majors. They all have a major role in our life, great qualities. And that's one of the magicians. What greater creativity is there than giving shape to the chaos of experience? And that is what the magician excels at. There can be so much going on. There is so much chaos in the world, but the magician knows how to use his power, how to use the power he's given and direct it into the world and make something of himself in this world. And then the High Priestess. Here we have another quote. "We all carry within us a dim sense of who we are, of a genuine self never seen by other people and impossible to explain." And that is a huge role of the High Priestess and why she is so important. She allows us to really dive into the depths of who we are, to be listening to the universe, to the collective unconscious of everything that's ever been learned, and to draw that up and to use that to find that sense of who am I really? How do I hold on to that with all the chaos of the world going on? How do I express that? Because that is one of the most difficult things to express, and that's why it's a quote I love so much. We all do have a sense. It's like we can't portray it. No matter how authentic we try to be, how real we try to be, there is something in us that feels like, I know who I am. I know what I feel inside. I know what my morals are. I know what I think of this world. I know all that, but how do I explain it properly? It is difficult, if not impossible, to explain who are we really and how do we really feel. And that is the aim of the High Priestess. And that is why she is so passive. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of silence, a lot of retreat, to be able to sit down and feel it and to know this is who I am. This is what I need to be. And then what do? We use what we think we've heard, or even what we know we've heard, and we use it as the magician to create. But are we using both at the same time? No, we're not, because we're either creating or we're listening. In small moments, and in my life, I've been able to do both at the same time, but I know it's awfully hard. Because when we are creating, there is so much ego there that it's often impossible to listen to the High Priestess's voice inside of us. So the moments when we feel truly enlightened, or like we are doing something truly spectacular, we're all in, and we feel just so right with everything, that's a glimpse, just a very small glimpse of the world and the unification back into the Fool. One more quote that I definitely want to share is this. "In the traditional split of Western and Eastern religion, the magician represents the West with its emphasis on action and historical salvation, the High Priestess the East, the way of separation from the world and time." And yes, we see that in many different religions. In Western religions, we do see a lot more action, a lot more doing. We see grandeur, and we see, the church, for instance, wanting to help people, being very proactive, building large cathedrals, showing off its beauty in the name of their God, just being a lot more, in my opinion, ego-driven. Their God is a God driven out of ego. We find this in the Bible. He is a jealous God. He's an angry God. We do hear that he is a loving God. But what we're hearing is he's very active. He's a very active God. And thus, his followers become very active people. Wherein, say, more Eastern culture, just say Buddhism, Hinduism, we see a lot more emphasis on solidarity, taking time to reflect, no harm to others, striving for enlightenment. We see in a lot of these religions, cultures, belief systems. Meditation is something that you don't hear a lot about in Western religions. We see them more in Eastern religions, where they're really meditating on life, on their role in life, on peace and understanding, rather than trying to put their beliefs on others. They are really trying to find a home within themselves. So we can definitely correlate that directly to the magician and the high priestess. That's it. That was my notes, and that's really what I wanted to talk about. And it is a view that I absolutely adore and I resonate with, because I feel like in my personal life, it might be easier for me to see or to feel than some people because I am a gay man. I could be wrong there, but I feel like that's probably true, because I feel my feminine side on a deeper level than a lot of men do. And not that men don't. I think even the most masculine of men certainly have feminine traits. They're just not very receptive to them. Or it is tabooed in many cultures for men to be showing. In fact, I just saw, and I won't even be able to say this the correct way, but something about the Vikings being killed off by the Anglo-Saxons. And there was a quote from a historical document kind of showing this, where it literally says that they're killing them off because basically because they are in a roundabout way seducing the wives of these Anglo-Saxons, because the Vikings took great care in their appearance. They brushed their hair daily. They bathed at least once a week. They took care. They adorned themselves. They looked nice. They looked beautiful. And in that day of age, that was very feminine. They were taking away, women were more attracted to them at that time. Not in today's culture. Many women don't like that as much. They like the pure, rough maleness. But in that day of age, the women looked at them and adored them. So the Anglo-Saxons got pissed and decided that they didn't want anybody intruding and stealing their women. And that was one of the reasons given for killing them. So throughout history, there has been shifts in how masculinity and femininity have been perceived. And I read too that a lot of people, I don't know a lot, but there is a group of thought that thinks that Adam was a hermaphrodite, that he was split, so that he could see, so that there were two distinct parts. And I think that happens in, what is that movie called? It's about a drag queen, guys. I haven't seen it in ages. But in so many cultures, in so many stories, we see this. We see the separate male and female, where Rachel Pollack has really hinted and given a lot to the idea that we're supposed to be both. And that is the goal, is to not balance the two, but mix the two so well that they are one again. In exhibiting both of those traits at the same time, which is a lovely thought. So that is the beginning, basically the beginning of her book. And I may do some more videos on what else I find in her major arcana, because I'm going to be rereading all about her majors too, and her view on it. It's a great... She uses the 7 card. How do I say that? The 7 card layout, where there are 3 sets of 7, adding up to the 21, and where each row really corresponds to the one above it. So we see a lot of repetition in the major, a lot of duality, a lot of 2s. So I'm looking forward to reading that again and sharing what I find in there. But that's it for this video. Feel free, please, if you have any ideas about this, anything that you think I said wrong, any contributions you have, comment about it, and let's talk about it, because I think that as far as an overall view and reason for the major arcana, that would be it. And, it's one I've always resonated to. I resonated it when I first read the book, and I'm resonating with it all over again. I'm feeling that. So that's it, guys. Hope you all are having a great day. Bye-bye.